Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this time we're going to animate a 2D collection of linear transformations. So let's jump in and see how things look. All right, now where I left you in the previous video, I'm assuming which you have watched the previous video, we had something like a shape, whatever it was. I had a triangle, you had something else, and we've scaled it. So we've generated some sort of scaling matrix. We've multiplied the points on our shape by the scaling matrix and created this transformed, scaled in this case. I've also got three others. I did a rotation by some angle. I just chose 45 degrees. I did a shear parallel to the X and a shear parallel to the Y. Now this one's actually kind of cool. Notice that the point that was on the Y-axis actually didn't get sheared, which is exactly as intended. So this should be at least visual verification that you've got something similar going on in yours. Make sure that you do. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do some animation. And I've got 4 different tasks set out here, which you can pause me and read. That's perfectly fine. We're only going to do the first one. You're going to do all the rest. So I want to create an animation showing how the shape changes. The shape in this particular case is my triangle. Changes as we scale between -2 and 2 in both X and Y directions. To keep things simple, I'm just going to keep the scaling in the X and Y the same throughout. So what I want you to do is I want you to import everything from the IPyWidgets library. So from IPyWidgets, import star. The star means grab everything. Right? Now, really, I could have done interactive and play, but this is just simpler. We're going to be using the interactive tool from the IPyWidgets. Now, the rest of the code that I have here in this block simply generates the static image that we had before. So you should already have this code. So put me on pause, go grab that code, where all you're doing is generating the static image from your original and scaled on top of each other. Put me on pause and go grab it. Okay, you should have this code now that does exactly what I just said. We're going to layer on top of this the frames of an animation. So the first thing I want to do okay, we decide on how many frames there are in the animation. I'm just going to call that total frames. Let's just say there's 100 of them. Okay, if you took more frames, it would be finer and finer steps. If you took fewer frames, it would be big chunky steps. 100's probably just fine, whatever. So total number of frames, I wanted an S there, total frames is going to be 100. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my transformation parameters to have the same number of points as the number of frames. So let me show you what I mean. If I'm doing a scaling matrix, I need the values of A and B. Right? So if you allow me, I'm going to scroll up here, way past all my other code. This is my transformation matrix. I need values for A and B. And in fact, I'm going to do 100 frames, so I need 100 different values for A and B. Now I'm going to use the same values for A and B in this particular case, just out of simplicity. So let me scroll down here. Okay, so I'm going to do np.linspace. I am using linspace very, very particularly here. I'm going from -2 to 2 with total frames as the number of points in that list. And B is going to be the same. Okay, so now I've just created a list of A's and a list of B's that are each 100 units long. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to define I'll call this my scale plotter function. And it takes in the frame number. And inside all of this, I'm going to highlight everything in here, press tab to indent it in, so now it's a part of the loop. Inside this frame or this scale plotter function, I'm going to generate the proper new shape and plot it. So I'm going to do A, where I'm calling on index frame. Now pause and think about this for a second. I'm going to send in my index frame at 0, and then it's going to say A0 and B0 is my amount of scaling. Then I'm going to send my index 1. It's going to say A1 and B1 are my index of scaling. Then I'm going to send in index 2, and then A2 and B2 are my index of scaling. Then it's going to generate those new shapes, plot those new shapes. So if I do scale plotter of just, let's say, 10, that should be the 10th one. Now this is not an animation, obviously. Oop, it did not like that. Ooh, total frames. Boy, I forgot to make all of those plural. Okay, there we go. So this is really kind of uninteresting. The 10th one in the list. Let's pull up a scratch cell just so we can see it. All right, the 10th thing in A is some negative number. Well, let's see here. Oh, there's a lot of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I think that's the 10th one. So my scaling was negative 1.6. All right, so this is what the image looks like when I scale by negative 1.6 in both directions. But I didn't want to just do a static plot. I wanted to do an interactive plot. So I'm going to do interactive, and I'm going to call my scale plotter function in the interactive tool. And then what I'm going to do is say frame equals. Now, this is going to tell the interactive tool where my frames in my image are coming from. I'm going to do play, because play will actually play it like a movie. Value equals, this is where I'm going to start. I'm going to start at frame 0. My minimum frame is 0. My maximum frame is total frames. And the step that I'm going through, I believe step was the next thing. Yep. My step is equal to 1. Because my frame numbers are going 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 99. Okay, now I didn't call this anything, so it's just going to run that interactive. So I run it. Now, it gives me this weird little gray box here, which is actually supposed to be 4 buttons. At the time that I'm recording this video, November 6th at 5 p.m., whatever, Google Colab doesn't support actually showing the text of these buttons, which is highly obnoxious, but whatever. The left-hand button is the play button. So if you go to it and just click on it, you can actually see that it's now animating through all of the different scalings. And I went from a scaling of -2 to a scaling of +2. Oh, now I got an error. My index 100 is out of bounds. Well, I went up to total frames, but my list was actually from 0 through 99. Because remember, Python does things where it does not include the last thing in a generated list. So I should take 1 away from my maximum. And now when I play it, and we just go ahead and let it play here. Okay, there's a 0. Now it's coming back on the positive scalings. There's a 1. And this is a scaling of 2, and it finishes up. Okay, so scrolling back up, the only things I really did is I changed how I pulled in the information into my linear transformation matrix. I wrapped my plotter inside some function where it called on simply the frame number, and I set up my total frames and parameters outside that function. After all that was done, I used the interactive tool to actually build the short animation. So what you're going to do is you're going to create 3 more animations, one that does rotations, one that does shears, and one that does shears in the other direction. All right, see you in the next one.